In the winter of 1885, the Wyoming wind didn't blow, it hunted. The Caldwell cabin stood alone at the edge of the tree line, weathered by time, barely holding against the cold. Inside, Sarah lit the last sliver of kindling beneath the iron stove. The fire caught slow, casting faint orange across bare floorboards and tired quilts. Thomas, 10, sat at the table, sharpening the same pencil he used for every spelling lesson. His little sister Lily, curled on a cot with a rag doll missing one eye, hummed a tune that barely rose above the wind. Sarah moved quietly through the kitchen. Thin arms, tired eyes, a strength that didn't shout but settled deep in the bones. She pressed her palm to the windowpane. Frost clung like breath made permanent. She whispered, "This cold'll take us if we don't get through the week." No one heard her. Then came the voice. Thin, sharp, and alive with urgency. "Mama, come quick! There's a man in the snow!" Sarah turned fast. Thomas had burst through the door, cheeks red, eyes wide with something between fear and wonder. The wind followed behind him, biting hard. She threw on her shawl and stepped outside. The storm had softened, but the cold hadn't. Snow crunched under her boots as she crossed the yard. And there, half buried in a drift near the woodpile, lay a man. Still. His coat stiff with ice, his breath fogging slow. Even frozen and bleeding, he looked like he came from another world. Fine leather boots. A wool coat with silver buttons. Money hung from him even in ruin. Lily stood in the doorway now, hands gripping the frame. "We can't leave him," she said. Sarah hesitated, just long enough for the wind to cut deeper. Then she stepped forward and rolled the man gently. A gash split his temple. Blood soaked his side. She looked at Thomas. "Get the door open," and stoke the fire. They dragged him in, one boot at a time. He groaned once. A sound scraped from somewhere deep. By the time they laid him on Sarah's cot, his hands were shaking. She tore strips from an old nightgown and packed the wound near his ribs. Boiled water. Steeped the last of her willow bark. Pressed a damp cloth to his brow. He flinched but didn't speak. That night, Sarah sat in a chair near the fire, rifle across her knees, watching the stranger breathe. She didn't know his name. Didn't know where he came from. But something in her gut said the storm hadn't ended. It had just come inside. By morning, the wind had gone still, but the house hadn't. The stranger lay motionless on the cot, his breath shallow, his jaw clenched even in sleep. The fever had come hard overnight. Skin hot, sweat soaking through the blanket Thomas had pulled from the foot of his own bed. Sarah moved between stove and bedside, sleeves rolled, face set. She wiped his brow with a cloth steeped in yarrow and muttered instructions to no one but herself. "Keep breathing," she said. "That's all you need to do." She'd stopped waiting for miracles long ago, but her hands knew what to do anyway. The stranger stirred mid-morning. His fingers twitched. His eyes opened a sliver, pale blue, unfocused, full of pain. He blinked at the ceiling, then at the woman leaning over him. "Water," he whispered. Sarah reached for the tin cup and held it to his lips. He drank slow, like he didn't trust it to stay. "You got a name?" she asked. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. She waited. Finally he said, "Jack." She watched him for a moment. "That the truth?" He gave the faintest shrug, and that was answer enough. "I'm Sarah Caldwell," she said. "This is my house. Those are my children. You're bleeding in my bed." Jack didn't speak. "I don't take in strays for sport," she added. "But you were dying. And my daughter wouldn't let me walk away." In the far corner, Lily sat cross-legged with her doll, watching silently. Jack closed his eyes. "Didn't mean to bring trouble." "You didn't," Sarah replied. "But I reckon it's following close behind." That night, after the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Jack thrashed in his fever. Sarah sat beside him, pressing a hand to his chest to keep him still. He muttered words, names she didn't know. Barlow, Isabel, The southern range. His voice cracked with grief, not fear. Whatever he was running from, it had already taken something from him. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. But when he quieted, she sat back in the chair and stared at the man she'd brought in from the snow. A man with a wound, a secret, and eyes that didn't belong to a drifter. The storm had passed, but the cold lingered, and so did he. Jack spent the next 2 days on that cot, drifting in and out. Fever burned high, then broke. The wound at his ribs began to close. His voice returned in fragments, then in full. By the 4th day he stood, barefoot on the cabin floor. Wrapped in a quilt, he reached for the tin cup on the table. His hands still shook, but he didn't fall. Thomas stood nearby, silent, arms crossed, watching. Sarah saw it from across the room. Jack noticed too. "You don't trust me," he said. Thomas didn't answer. Jack nodded. "That's all right. I wouldn't either." Later, Sarah found Jack outside, standing in the pale sun, ribs still bandaged. He stood near the fence line, hammer in hand, fixing a broken rail with slow, deliberate swings. She stepped into the yard, laundry basket at her hip. "You're supposed to be resting," she called. Jack didn't turn. "Figured you've done enough for me." "I needed to do something. I didn't save you to be polite," she said. He looked at her then, a small, crooked smile forming. "No. But it's the only way I know to say thank you." She said nothing, just turned back toward the line and kept pinning clothes, but her hands moved slower. That night, she brought him a plate of cornbread, left it on the table by the cot. Didn't say a word, didn't need to. The next morning, he was already splitting kindling when she stepped outside. A soft fog hung over the yard. Jack moved carefully but with purpose. Not a guest, not a burden. That day he showed Thomas how to set a snare, caught a rabbit before dusk. It was the first meat they'd had in weeks. At supper, Jack sat quiet while Lily chatted about birds and songs, and how her doll could survive a blizzard better than any cowboy. Jack smiled, just with his eyes. After the children had gone to sleep, Sarah sat across from him at the fire. She held a chipped mug of weak coffee. He sharpened a small knife, slow and steady. "I haven't had a man in this house since Daniel died," she said. Jack didn't look up. He was good. Strong hands, quiet eyes. Built this cabin with his brother. Fever took him fast. She looked into the fire. "I buried him behind the birch tree. Told the kids he went to sleep. Truth is, I haven't really woken up since." Jack said nothing for a while. Then, "He was a lucky man." She glanced at him. "You don't know anything about him." Jack met her gaze. "I know he had you." They sat in silence. The kind that doesn't press or linger. Just fills the room like heat from a fire that finally holds. By the 7th day, the snow had thinned into muddy trails. The wind no longer howled. It whispered. And Jack had become part of the rhythm. He patched the chicken coop, mended a loose board on the porch, and sharpened Thomas's knife without being asked. But he never spoke of where he came from, or why the name Jack sat in his mouth like something borrowed. Sarah didn't ask. Not yet. That morning, she stepped out with a pail of water and found him on the roof, repairing a loose shingle with one hand pressed to his side. "You should rest," she called up. He didn't look down. "I rest too long, I forget how to move." "Suit yourself," she muttered. But when she turned away, there was the shadow of a smile on her lips. Inside, Lily braided string for her doll's new belt. Thomas practiced carving letters into soft wood. The house, for the first time in weeks, felt still, not in the way that precedes grief, but in the way that follows healing. Then came the knock. Hard, sharp. The kind that didn't wait for welcome. Sarah opened the door to find Mr. Silas Croft, a banker dressed in city wool with boots too clean for real work. He tipped his hat. "Mrs. Caldwell." "Croft," she said flatly. His eyes wandered past her shoulder. "I heard you took in a man." Sarah stepped into his view. Has no concern of yours. Well, maybe not. But the bank is. Your payment's overdue. We've given grace, but patience has limits. You said I had until spring. Yes, Croft said, and spring came early. You now have 30 days. No more. Behind her, Jack appeared in the doorway, arms folded. Croft saw him and stiffened. This your stranger? He asked. Sarah didn't answer. Croft smirked. He's got the look of trouble. Jack said nothing. Croft handed over a folded notice. 30 days, or we foreclose. He tipped his hat again, then turned and mounted his horse. The sound of hooves faded fast. Jack stepped forward. He come often? Only when he smells blood, Sarah said. They stood on the porch together, watching the trail Croft had carved through the mud. He's right, Sarah added. I don't have the money. I have something better, Jack replied. Sarah glanced at him. What? He looked back toward the hills. Time, and the will to use it. That night, Sarah found Jack standing near the barn, staring out into the dark. She stepped beside him. You running from something? She asked. He took a long breath, cold air in, silence out. Not anymore, he said. The sun was high when they came. 2 riders. Black coats. Dust still clinging to their hats. Jack was in the field, mending the fence when he heard them. Hooves steady and close. Not the kind that wandered. The kind that hunted. He straightened, watched them crest the ridge. Sarah stepped out of the cabin, wiping her hands on her apron. Lily followed, barefoot. Thomas stood by the chopping block, hand on the hatchet handle. Jack turned to Sarah. Get the children inside. She saw his face and didn't argue. Inside, Lily clutched her doll. Thomas closed the curtains and bolted the door. Jack stepped into the yard alone. The riders didn't dismount. They stopped near the fence and sat there, silent in their saddles, like men weighing something unseen. The taller one leaned on his horn. You're a hard man to find, Vance. Jack's body went still. You've got the wrong name, he said. The shorter man laughed. We don't. Barlow says the deed's still out there. Says you've got it. And says we should finish what the river didn't. Jack didn't flinch. You're trespassing. The tall one chuckled. And you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. Jack took a slow step forward. Leave. The shorter man's hand hovered near his gun. Not without what we came for. From the cabin window, Sarah watched it all. Jack standing there unarmed, wind pressing at his coat, 2 men ready to kill. Thomas whispered, He is outnumbered. Sarah didn't answer. Her hand found the rifle leaning near the doorframe. Outside, the tall rider moved first, a twitch of the wrist. Jack ducked left, grabbed a post from the broken fence and swung hard. The gun misfired. The horse bucked. Jack lunged at the second rider, knocking him clean from the saddle. It was quick, brutal. When it was over, both men were in the dirt, one groaning, the other cursing, blood trickling from his lip. Jack stood over them, breath heavy. Tell Barlow I'm still alive. And I'm not hiding. The tall one sat up, coughing. You won't be for long. That's not your call anymore, Jack said. Just then, another horse approached. A third rider. Sarah stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. It was Croft. He reined in slow, scanning the scene. Jack, standing tall, 2 strangers on the ground. Did I interrupt something? Croft asked. No, Sarah said. You're just in time to see what happens when you threaten my land. Croft's eyes narrowed. This your man now? Jack stepped forward. My name is Jacob Vance. I own the Rocking V Ranch, and I'm the majority shareholder of the Cattlemen's Bank in Cheyenne. Croft went pale. I suggest, Jacob continued, you ride back to town, tear up that foreclosure notice, and remember that this family's debt is settled. Croft swallowed hard. You can't. I already did, Jacob said. Croft turned without another word and rode off. Sarah looked at Jacob. You lied, she said. I did, he replied. You could have told me. I didn't know if I'd earned that right. A pause. You still don't, she said. But you're closer than you were this morning. That evening, the wind shifted. The light changed. It wasn't something you could see in the trees or feel in the air. But Sarah knew it. The fear that had lived in the corners of her home had begun to retreat. Inside, Lily set out extra plates for supper without being asked. Thomas sat a little closer to Jacob than he had the night before. No one mentioned the fight. No one needed to. After the dishes were cleared, Jacob stood at the edge of the porch, coat slung over one shoulder. The last of the sunlight stretched across the fields like a golden river. I need to go, he said. Sarah leaned in the doorway. Where? To Cheyenne. Then Texas, he said. Barlow won't stop unless I stop him. She nodded slowly, the way someone does when they've known the answer for some time, but hadn't wanted to ask the question. You're not just running from him, she said. No, he answered. I'm running toward something now. A silence passed. He looked down at the worn ring on his thumb, then back up. If I come back, he began. You come back whole, Sarah said. He didn't speak. Just stepped down into the yard, past the garden rows, toward the barn where his saddle waited. Thomas watched him from the porch steps. Lily slipped her doll into Jacob's satchel before he left. The next morning, he was gone. Weeks passed. The snow melted from the north slope first. Crocus flowers bloomed beneath the windowsills. Sarah planted again. And word returned before Jacob did. A letter arrived by Ryder. Folded tight, ink faint. Barlow's been sentenced. The land's back in our name. I spoke in court, for you as much as for me. The judge upheld the deed. The truth stood, finally. If the land still remembers me, I'll come home with the rain. Sarah read it 3 times, folded it neatly, slipped it into the Bible next to Daniel's name. Then, one evening in early spring, a horse appeared on the ridge. Lily saw him first. She dropped the basket of laundry and ran through the yard, calling out his name. Thomas stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, watching as Jacob Vance rode slowly toward the house. He dismounted without a word. Lily crashed into him, wrapping her arms tight around his waist. Thomas came down the steps more slowly. You said you'd come back, the boy said. I did, Jacob answered. Took the long way. Sarah stood in the doorway, arms folded, apron still dusted in flour. She didn't move. Jacob met her eyes. Then he reached into his vest and pulled out the folded deed. It's yours, he said. Signed, sealed. This land belongs to you. Sarah didn't look at the paper. She stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and placed her hand on his chest. That's not why you came back. No, Jacob said. It's not. Spring settled over the Caldwell land like a blessing earned. The ground softened. The creek ran fuller than it had in years. Chickens clucked again in the yard, and something inside the cabin that had long been silent began to stir. Not music, not laughter, just life. Jacob didn't rush to reclaim anything. He moved like a man learning his place, one nail, one fence post, one slow breath at a time. He helped Thomas dig new furrows in the garden rows. Repaired the barn door with Lily perched on a hay bale, swinging her legs and handing him nails. He didn't talk about Texas, or the trial, or what came next. Neither did Sarah. Until the morning he planted the oak. It was young, barely thicker than his wrist. He knelt by the barn, pressed his hand to the soil, then straightened the tree with quiet focus. Sarah stepped outside and watched from the porch, apron strings tugging gently in the breeze. You think it'll take root? She asked. Jacob looked up. If I tend it right. He patted the soil down and stood. She walked to him, wiping flour from her fingers. You didn't just bring back a deed, she said. You brought back a second chance. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a ring, silver, smooth, simple. Worn but whole. I'm no preacher, he said. But I'd like to build something honest. With you. Sarah didn't answer right away. Then she took his hand and said, "Yes. But only if we build it together." Word spread fast. A preacher came from Bitter Creek. Neighbors rode in with baskets and blessings. The birch tree behind the cabin, where Daniel lay beneath the earth, became their altar. Lily braided a crown of wildflowers and wore it like royalty. Thomas stood at Jacob's side, tall and sure. There was no piano, no lace, just the sun, the wind, and a promise. The preacher cleared his throat. "Do you, Jacob Vance, vow to build not just a home, but a life, one that holds this woman and her children as your own?" "I do," Jacob said. "And do you, Sarah Caldwell, take this man not for what he's owned, but for what he's carried?" "I do," she said, with a voice steady as stone. Lily stepped forward and offered the wooden bird she'd tied with ribbon. Thomas held out the ring. Jacob took it, slipped it onto Sarah's hand. Then, without hesitation, he leaned in. He kissed her, not with drama, but with the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they were about to make new. That night, lanterns swung in the trees. Children danced in the grass. Sarah and Jacob sat on the porch steps, side by side, arms just touching. No riches. No grand declarations. Just warmth. Just rest. Just the beginning of something rooted. Some stories don't end in thunder or applause. Some just take root and grow.